Hello everyone, and welcome to the second video of this tutorial series. Last time we talked about the basic thinking involved in turning this Rhino 3D model into a prototype. We went over how to think about scale and how to think about materials and the prototyping process and tools involved, so on and so forth. In this video, I'm going to get right into breaking this thing apart and show you how this works. So the first thing you want to do is copy your file, or duplicate your file rather. That's so you ensure that you don't change the original file that you get from your client, and or whatever original file that you created. We want to preserve it, and we want to make edits onto a duplicate file. So in order to do that, come up here to File, Duplicate, and it will duplicate this file, and then you can rename it, and that's essentially saving as, so to speak. So right now it has it as a copy. We'll call it the InnerSun prototype, and I like to put dates because usually end up with mini versions. Today's date is March 27th, and the time currently is 11:18. So that's how I save files. And press enter, and this thing has been saved. Now, I usually like to close the other file so that the computer can run faster, but I'm not going to go through that right now. So okay, now that we've done that, we want to isolate a part of this to work on, because right now it looks a little overwhelming. And so the first thing I'm going to start with is the globe here, and I'm going to turn off everything else. So the easiest way to do that is you go over here, you open up your little layer box, and I want to easiest way for me to do this really is to expand all layers. Let's see what I can turn off from here though. Turn off all that stuff. We can turn off that and that. Okay, that's as much as I can turn off from there. Let's open up this. I'll turn this off. Get rid of these things. And we are left with just the trusses. So it's a good idea when you're working with things like this to copy. When you're wanting to change a part of this model, it's a good idea to copy things over. So let's start with the upper trusses are going to be pretty easy, so we'll turn those off. Let's start with the lower trusses and deal with those first. So we'll open those up and unlock it, and you can see we got a lot going on here. So really, what we want, we don't want this. We don't want this to be a 3D shape, really, because essentially we're going to lay all this out onto a flat piece of paper that we can send to a CNC machine. And luckily, the creator of this model has included a curve layer, which has the curves that were extruded. So we can actually turn off the solid and turn on the curve, and this is what we want to remove from the model, are these curves. So I'm just going to do that for all of these layers. I'm going to, I'm just going to go down here, expand all layers. It's going to make my life a little bit easier. And I'm going to go, we don't want these ones expanded, we already decided. So we'll close that. And then we'll go through here, and so I'm going to unlock all these. We want the curve on and the solid off. Curve on, solid off, so on and so forth. I wanted to say that I'm not the best Rhino user. This program is fairly new to me. There are probably a lot easier ways to do some of the things that I'm doing. So please feel free to go online and search for better resources as far as how to get around in Rhino and how to manipulate things in Rhino, and essentially how to use the program. This is not necessarily a tutorial about how to use Rhino. It's more of just a demonstration of how we arrived at our prototype. All right, so here we go. We have all the solids turned off, and now we're dealing with just our curves. So what I want to do is I want to take all of these, and I'm going to hold Option after I selected them all, and press this arrow on the gumball to copy these over. Okay, and then now that I have a copy, I want to put this copy on a new layer. So let's go down here. Let's collapse all these layers now that we don't need to do that anymore. So collapse all these layers and let's make a new layer. Let's call this layer CNC. Okay, and then on this layer, I'm going to make another layer. Create new sublayer. And I'm going to call this sublayer lower trusses. Lower truss. Let's just call it lower truss. Okay, so there we go. Now our next step is going to be, we can actually move this to that layer. So let's move it to the layer called lower truss that is all the way down here in our CNC area. So here we go. So this is a thing that it does, and I'm not exactly sure why it does this. So there is a way around it. What it's done here is it's turned that curve into a solid. So I'm not really sure why it's done that. But the way around it is to actually, so what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll delete it. I'm actually glad that that happened so that I could show you the workaround that I found. So you can take all of these, right? You hit Command C to copy, Command V to paste. Now, because we just pasted that, what we just pasted is selected. It's not on a layer for some reason, so let's try this again. Let's try putting it on this lower truss layer and see what happens. Okay, looks like that worked, and now we should be able to move these over here, and they are on the lower truss layer, and they also have not turned into a solid. So that's great news. Now let's just make sure that they're on that layer. Yep, we can turn the layer on and off to see that they're on that layer. Great. So now that that's the case, we can turn the existing model, we can turn that stuff off so we don't see it anymore. Now, what we want to do here is we want to take all these trusses and rotate them out to be in the same plane so that we can lay them out on a sheet. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go here into top view, so it's a lot easier to stay organized, and I'm going to start rotating these out. Now, I already know by exploring the model and turning layers on and off that this half of the model is exactly the same as this half of the model. So all we need to do is rotate this half and then print those trusses twice. So I'm going to get rid of these. Okay, and I also know the degree of rotation for all of these trusses, and I imagine that there's a much easier way to do this, but I'm just going to show you the way that I did it, and we'll go from there. So I select each truss. I'll select one truss at a time. I know that this is 7.5 degrees, so I'm going to rotate it. I know it's 7.5 degrees out of square, so I'm going to rotate it 7.5 degrees back into square, and now that's straight. Wonderful. And I know that each one of these is 15 degrees away from each other, so I'm just going to add 15 degrees to 7.5, and that will give me 22.5 degrees, and that's how much I rotate this one. Okay, and then I'm going to just continue on like that through all of these trusses until I get them all rotated out. Okay, so you get the idea. We're going to rotate all these out. We could continue on and rotate these ones too, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to stop there. So now that we got these all rotated and they're all pointing in the same direction, we want to make sure that they're in plane with each other. So let's get a different view of what's going on here. So here are all these trusses. I'm going to select these ones over here and just get rid of them for the time being because we don't need them for this tutorial. Alright, so now we can see all these. They're all in a different place and a different orientation, so let's separate them out a little bit. And there we go. So these are all of our trusses, and they're spread out a little bit more. Now they're not in plane yet, though. See, if we look at the top view, they're all still right here. So what we can do is we can go we can select this, and we could drag it and try to line it up here, but you know that's never going to be very accurate, and we must, these all have to be on the exact same plane. So let's take a look at where this is, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to enter the command box edit, and then we're going to scroll down here to position. Now this tells us the position of this truss, or of this object. So let's move it this way. If we move it that way, the x-axis changes, right? So let's make this something even, nice and even. So it's currently, let's make it 1242. And you have to hit apply on this box edit window for it to actually work. You can't just hit enter. So you hit apply, and now that's at 1242. And what we can do is we can go through and select this one, and we can make this one at 1242. Hit apply. There we go. So on and so forth. So you get the idea. As we go through here, we know that 1242 is the same exact number every time. Wonderful. So now these are all in the same plane that way, in this way. And what about the back? Well, the back, they're just a line. They're in a line. So that's great. Now you can see that if we wanted to put these on a sheet, we would be able to do that. If we zoom in here, we could see that there's some discrepancies or some errors made in this curve drawing. So we would actually need to go in here and clean that up. That's not going to translate well on the CNC. The other thing that we're going to need to do is these lines in here are not going to become a tool path. A tool path is essentially a line or a curve that the CNC knows to follow with the cutting tool or the scoring tool or whatever tool you're using. Originally we wanted to take this inner detail and score it with a score path, but we ended up just not having the scale. Because of the scale and the tools we were using and the time frame, it ended up not being an option. But if you were using a laser cutter, you could definitely keep all of these inside paths or lines, line work as a path that could be scored by a laser cutter, and the outside path could be cut by the laser cutter or the CNC. But anyways, so it would be good, just in general, as part of your file, to leave this inner line work as a backup plan, or as in case you decide to later on go and use a different machine that could execute this process. So in the next video, I will show you how we turn these trusses that are now flattened in plane into tool paths, essentially, that can be separated by layers and that CNC software can read. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.